Okay, so I want to start diving into our agenda for the month. And of course, top of mind, as it should be top of everybody's mind, is the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, the horrendous murder of George Floyd recently has thankfully has resulted in a lot of outrage that is hopefully going to bring about some change. But it has not just sparked outrage just in the United States, it's sparked outrage worldwide. And Yana, is it good if I call you Yana or Ayana? Do you prefer?
Either or is fine.
Okay, good. Yana, I wanted to start by talking with you a little bit because you were one of the organizers for the Black Lives Matter peaceful march in Osaka. And I know you talked a lot about that already on the Curly and Kansai podcast, but I was wondering if you could, for the benefit of our viewers, just kind of recap for us what it was that kind of led you to be part of that event and to decide to take a part in organizing it.
Well, for those who don't know me and don't know what I do in Osaka, I have a collective called Black Creatives Japan. And I'm also involved in a group called Black Women in Japan, and both started in Facebook groups. And with those groups, we also try to do events outside of online. And we've done like conferences and big talent events with both groups. So I felt like I've had this experience of organizing these types of events for a while with the Black community in Japan, and also not just for Black people, because with Black Creatives Japan, we have like a talent show, but we invite everybody to come and see that we're not just one type of people. We don't like just one type of thing. We have many types of talents and skills. So when I had two friends that were on Instagram doing a poll to see who was interested in doing a march, one of the girls who is not Black, none of them are Black, but they have helped with Black creatives before. One is a photographer. I said to her, like, hey, do you need any help with organizing this march? I can get a team for you to help you. So at first I wasn't really trying to join as one of the organizers, but as time went on, I realized I needed to be involved a little bit more. So I had started on like with the Facebook group, and then told her like, hey, this is a team I got from my group, Black Creatives Japan. I got 2 people. Then I was like, okay, maybe this person can join, this person can join, this person can join. And basically we ended up with 10 people to start doing all this organizing. Her friend, who's Japanese Peruvian, went to the police like maybe the Tuesday. So they did the poll June 1st. They went to the police June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th just to make sure everything's okay. And also went to the park to get a permit so we can hold people at the end of the march. So within like basically 5 days with 10 people, we were able to, organize a march for over 1,000, 2,000 people.
Was that one of the largest events that you ended up ever doing? Because it seems like it turned out to be really big.
Yes. It was like almost unexpected, but expected at the same time, because the 2 girls, they're like, we think like 200 people are going to show. My close friends were like, we thought it was just like 50 of us Black people are going to come and a few of our white allies, but it ended up being like about 2,000 people that the police told us, but media said really lower.
Cool. So you had mentioned also, talked about in the Curling Kansai podcast, that you didn't wait for the permit, that you basically you guys went ahead and you started organizing on Facebook. How important do you think that was?
I felt like because we were able to make that group, we were really... Actually, I decided to do it because they were asking for numbers. The police was asking for numbers of how many people would join. We don't know how many people are going to come. And then also the park told us too, like, hey, it costs this much with this many people. So we paid for 200 people, but it was 10 times that, right? So it was just like, well, it was cheap, but we can't predict how many people are going to come in an event that isn't really like, nobody pays to get in, and it's just open for anybody to come. So that's why we thought like doing the group first was good, and then just making sure we give out the information as soon as we got it. because we went to the police before we made the group and they said it was okay, it was just like, all right, now we just got to wait for the document. So that's why another reason why I was like, hey, let's just start the group now. Because my friend was like, let's just wait until we get the permit. I'm like, nah.
With the cost, did they actually make you pay more afterwards, or they're just like, that's that's
done.
good.
And they're all very nice. The police and the park security, they were just very accommodating.
That's
How much does it cost? I never even thought about it.
I think it depends on like each park and police, but where is it? I don't even remember now.
Okay, no, that's okay.
But it was cheap.
I didn't even know you had to pay.
Oh, okay. So the park permit was 1340 yen. Yes, that was the total. Yeah.
Wow,
that's not a lot.
No.
For like 2 hours, so it was okay.
Were there any major logistical challenges in setting it up, or did everything kind of like run smoothly?
Everything surprisingly ran smoothly, but the day of, I was panicking, and our group, like, because we also had trouble like just communicating with each other. Like we said, let's use Line or Facebook message anytime we need something. And we did use that. But in the very beginning, since there was so many people, we're like, we don't know where to go, what to do, what spot to like tell the instructions, because we had to use the megaphone and tell everybody the instructions before we actually marched. And we actually kind of slipped our minds to get like the speaker for that. And then one of our teammates just kind of stepped up and did that for the rest of the way. And then we had to do everything in like 200 groups. So like the first group was able to march first. Then we had to wait and like count people. And then we had to get somebody like we had many volunteers to lead the march as well, and then do the chants. That type of information, like we weren't really prepared for. We thought we were, but then we're like, oh no, we don't know what we're doing. But our volunteers also really, really just stepped up and just took lead when we didn't know exactly what to do. And some people had really useful skills. Like we had a medic team as well, like for first aid. And out of like 2,000 people, only one person kind of got sick with from the heat. So we didn't have any problems with that as well.
Were there, I know that there been some chatter online about this, about like at least one counter-protester potentially showing up. Were there many folks of that nature at the event?
No, it was just that one annoying dude who brought a friend, and people were joking to say that friend was his dog because he was threatened to bring a dog. And I just heard that two people that I know actually approached him. Two white people approached him and like was like asking like, what is your reason for coming here? Like, why are you trying to cause trouble? And they were saying some really anti-Semitic stuff as well. So they're like, you know what, we're just gonna leave you alone. And then they walked away. And another person I knew took the picture of him there, and that was it. They just walked away after a while. I never saw the person. After that, I was like, well, nobody else is causing any trouble. I feel like this is a successful march where nobody's really giving us issues. And there's people on the side who don't know what the march is about, but then like, I guess they see some signs and then they put their fist up, or they, you know, just support it in some way. Some people just also look very confused, and that's also fine.
So, Sachiko, I know you attended the Tokyo march, right? And Wakako, did you as well?
Yeah, I did.
So maybe you guys can talk for just a minute about like how that experience, the experience in Osaka, maybe how it compares to like Tokyo and what happened at Tokyo.
Okay, so I went to the protest, not the march. The march was like 1 week after, but I got sick. So just like I stayed home. But during the protest, it was intense. But like I remember walking, like marching, and then there were like policemen around us, and they were like yelling at each other. But it was such a bizarre situation to be in. Also because I was like surrounded by foreigners, not non-Japanese, and they were saying like fuck the police. So I said fuck the police with them. And of course I was surrounded by the police, so it was like fuck the police.
It's a quite timid fuck the police.
Yeah, but like as the time went by, I started to get like really like into it. So I was like, fuck the police. It was really cathartic. It was really nice. Yeah.
Oh, if only somebody had gotten video of that for a gift, that would have been perfect. Such correct. Fuck the police.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Wakako, what are your impressions?
So I couldn't make it to that protest, but I went to the march. There was like 3,500 people.
Wow.
But like more than 3,000 people for sure. That's a lot for Tokyo or like for Japan, you know. So and it was actually like a peaceful march. And I think like the organizers were like very cautious, you know, like to like not make it a protest or like angry protest. And you know, especially since a lot of foreigners were joining, because I'm not too sure about this, but they can't really join the protest, but when it's March, it's like okay for them to join as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah, and they can't risk their visas and you know, stuff like that anyway. So I think it was good that, you know, there were a lot of like really a lot of people joined in like March, and I saw a lot of people, you know, bringing their own signs, and you know, some are like printed ones, you know, like well-designed ones, but also there are a lot of people brought signs, you know, like literally just like Black Lives Matter or, you know, anti-racism and stuff like that. Just wrote it down, piece of paper, and, you know, brought it and just marched. And, you know, so I think that was really great. Just one thing, like after the march, I was like, you know, reading tweets and comments in Japanese. And I've seen quite a few of them saying like, I you know, like I wish there were more Japanese people at the march. And I was like, but how do you know who's Japanese and who's not? You know, like, like are you saying that because these people that you saw at the march don't look like you or don't talk like you? So you assume that they're not Japanese or not from here, you know, stuff like that. And that's exactly the assumption that we're, you know, that is problematic. Like that the whole mindset needs to be changed. So I think there's a lot more work to do from here, but overall it was great that actually happened here in Japan.
Yeah. So if I'm racking, and correct me if I'm wrong, first just a comment from Jay. I think it's a little oppressive that foreigners can't join political protests. Yeah, as I remember the discussion online, there didn't seem to be a lot. There was like kind of concrete about it, but there did seem to be this concern that there had been cases in the past where foreigners who had joined in political basically it wasn't necessarily a right granted to foreigners or guaranteed to foreigners, only to citizens or even to permanent residents. And so there was a lot of concern, well, they probably won't enforce that law, but they could. So I think a lot of people, you know, obviously wanted to be prudent, take precautions, and not risk anyone's, you know, visa or, you know, permanent resident status in Japan, which, yeah, I think is probably a good thing in the end.
Yeah, but I mean, it shouldn't even be a problem to begin with.
No, it really shouldn't. It really shouldn't.
The right to protest shouldn't be just if you're like a Japanese national. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Right. So I agree that it's oppressive.
Yeah. And unfortunately, after that, I think, and I don't have the link up, so I don't have the details, but there was a case of somebody who was in the United States who had participated in a protest, and I believe was an immigrant here. I can't remember their legal status exactly, but they were basically in an ICE detention center after the protest because they got arrested at the event, and it's now putting their immigration status in jeopardy. So that's not just a Japan issue. I think that it's definitely an issue here in the U.S., particularly in the current political climate. So moving on a little bit. So I know that Yana had been discussed a little bit in the Curling Kansai podcast that a lot of people were focusing in the online discussion, particularly the Japanese language discussions about, oh, you're going to spread COVID, you're going to spread COVID. And, you know, you expressed some frustration that there was like all this attention being given to things other than the message of the actual protest. Do you think there was just a tactic and like an intentional tactic? Or do you think there was more behind it?
I don't know if it was a tactic, but I just know that anytime there's like, even if it's not just foreigners, Japanese online, like especially trolls, just want to attack us in some way. So when they saw that it was a bunch of foreigners doing an event that they feel is dangerous, they just kept, you know, commenting about it, like, stop doing this. If you have to put signs that you have to wear a mask, you shouldn't be doing this kind of comments.
Right.
So I'm not really sure if it was a tactic, but because we had things in Japanese and a lot of online Japanese netizens, they're like saying, oh, there is no discrimination, there is no racism in Japan. And it's just like, there is though. There is though.
Well, if you're Japanese and don't go looking for it.
Yeah, they're like, why do this in Japan? And it's also not just the Japanese, but also like races that live in Japan and who speak English. You're like, why are we even bringing this in Japan? Like the Japan Times article that I wrote, I mistakenly looked down at the comments, and the first two comments were really terrible. I'm like, I'm not looking at these anymore. There's no point. It's just trash.
Yeah, always avoid the Dippudan. It's always a good tactic online.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I wonder if another part of it was just, again, you know, going back to this issue of like kind of the general lack of like protests and activism, like street activism we sometimes see or we don't see now in Japan. If I'm thinking back, the most recent protests, large-scale protests before this that I can remember was when Sugita Miho made those comments about LGBT people being non-productive, and it sparked like crowds of like 5,000, 1,000, 2,000, you know, in Kichijoji and other areas of Tokyo. And I wonder if that's just part of it, that the right in Japan kind of moves to shut down any form of protest whatsoever, no matter what it's about.
I wouldn't be shocked. Yeah. So
yeah.
I want to answer Jay's question.
Oh,
go for it.
Can a peaceful march really change systemic racism in Japan? Go.
It's not necessarily like the sole purpose, because it's like a peaceful march, really what it is to wake people up and to tell people like there's some things going on that you might not be aware of. So if more people understand what's actually going on, then there might be some actions that happen behind the scenes that we might not know of, but people are like, you know what, this keeps going on. We see that 1,000 or 2 or 4 or 3 or 4 people say this is wrong. Maybe it's time to change, but maybe they won't do anything either. But if we keep doing something continuously and then keep making people aware, then eventually something will change. But knowing Japan and the government and how systems work here, it will take a lot longer than we hope.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to add something.
Okay.
Like, then what is the alternative? So if peaceful marches are not useful, which they are useful, then what is the alternative? Do nothing?
Yeah.
So
yeah, change has to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I've learned over the past couple of years, especially following Writer of Scratch on Twitter, who blogs a lot about LGBT movement in Japan and changes that happen there. A lot of change, I think, definitely happens a lot more on the local level before you ever see it like happen on the federal level. And I think Western press tends to be focused on the federal level all the time because they're trying to like, they report about Japan in these macroscopic bits. So usually stuff that is big enough to make, you know, news over in the US, you know, but, you know, there's all sorts of things going on. I think it's Kawasaki who's passing a hate crime ordinance. And the other, I think it was Osaka recently actually passed like a hate speech or has a hate speech ordinance and actually fined 2 people for hate speech online recently. So that's that kind of thing is definitely happening, but I think you're right. It's going to happen at the micro level before it happens at the macro level.
Right, and I agree with you with things like they should be starting with local governments, especially in the United States. But because things have been going on for like centuries, basically, they just want everything to just start like federally. I feel, and that's like the feeling because it's just going on for so long. In Japan, I feel like it does work more locally because you have to kind of like be delicate with like the language and everything, and you don't want to scare people away. So if people are doing it like locally, then people will follow suit. Like, because from what I know, living here is like everybody works together collectively. So if people are doing things and they see it, they will copy and do it too.
Yeah, like the spreading the message is like, the first step, right? Like to let people know this is happening, let people know that this is wrong, discrimination is bad. I mean, basic as hell, but it's Japan. So yeah, people follow, like whatever a lot of people are doing, Japanese people just follow and do it. So yeah, that's the thing. So if this becomes new normal or new standard, marching is normal, protesting is normal, going to election is hella normal. Like once we get there, yeah, I think the change starts to begin. I mean, it takes time.
And I think like doing the marches, even though it's foreign led, a lot of them are foreign led, but there are Japanese people who are joining. It does give them some type of comfort of actually speaking out, because since I've been here for 9 years, I didn't see much of protests or anything from not the far right Japanese people. They're just very blasé about it and like, it's whatever. And I want like more of them to kind of like have that fire burn in them, be like, you need to have some change in your government because it's really not good for you, especially the women. I'm just like, come on, y'all. Like, you're not angry at this. So I just want them to feel comfortable that they can do it themselves.
And Michael says raising awareness is definitely the first step. I agree, and I agree with everything everyone said. And I think raising awareness outside of Japan and English language media is also important. I mean, if you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago, what do you think about discrimination against Black people in Japan? I honestly would have been like, do what now? Shamefully, it wasn't an issue that was on my radar. It's only been being on Twitter, following folks like Yana and all the other folks I follow and hearing stories. There's a story I wrote with Chris for the site about Blackface in Japan, which I hadn't even realized had been an issue until I stumbled upon news items about that. And I went onto Twitter and I asked, Black people living in Japan, have you ever experienced discrimination? The response was, and I wasn't shocked because I live in America. So I guess I don't find it shocking anymore, but I was taken aback to the extent that, pretty much nearly everyone I talked to had some sort of story to tell. So I think that awareness of that really needs to be brought up more in English language media too.
Yeah, and we also think it's very important too now, especially after the march, that we should translate a lot of things to Japanese, so more and more people can get this information and the resources. Because a lot of times, especially on Twitter, especially English speaking Twitter, especially in the United States, like, we don't have to teach you this and that, like, you just need to do the research. And then in my mind is like, you know what, there's not a lot of information in Japanese for Japanese people to do research as well. So we can't just tell them do the research, because that means they have to have the skill of speaking and reading English to learn. And even with that, it'll be hard to understand some nuances. So I feel like if we are able to get translators who understand the nuances and translate into Japanese, then we can get more and more Japanese people to understand.